the minister, you will hear Mrs. Andrea Toussaint, who will be introducing the lady of the hour, our main presenter, Dr. Christine Hendricks. Ladies and gentlemen, please be reminded, this is a webinar series. It's not a replay. That is why you see there's a part 1, a part 2, and a whole heap more going to come after this, because the partnership is going to be one that is long, otherwise sustainable. So we ask and encourage you to join us next week. And at that time, feel free to bring a colleague with you. Without further ado, I now welcome Dr. Ruby Brown to bring her greetings. And I say, Dr. Brown, over to you.
Thank you, Prudence. And good morning, everyone. It is truly a pleasure to join you for this very important engagement this morning. But let me begin by acknowledging the Honorable Colonel Charles Jr., Minister of Labor and Social Security. Welcome, sir. Dr. Christine Hendricks, Executive Director of the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities. And through her, the wider JCPD team, representatives of our partner ministries, departments and agencies, our private sector colleagues, and all participants joining us today, including those viewing through the JIS live stream. To each and every one of you, I extend a very warm mind welcome. This engagement reflects a shared commitment between mine and the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities, and by extension, the Ministry of Labor and the Social Security, to strengthen how we serve. And really, that is what this is about. It is about how we serve. It is about what we value. It is about how we show for the people of Jamaica. And it is also about leadership, because inclusive service does not happen by chance. It happens when leaders at every level are intentional. Yes, intentional about how systems are designed, how services are delivered, and how people are treated. It happens when we move beyond simply doing what is required and commit ourselves to doing what is right. Mine takes very seriously its role as the Government of Jamaica's agency with responsibility for learning and leadership development, both of which are deeply connected to public sector transformation. We understand that transformation is not driven by policy alone. It's not driven by documents alone. Ultimately, transformation is driven by people, by their values, their mindset, their skills, and their willingness to serve differently and better. As I said that, I could hear the words of one professor some time ago. I think he nicely wrapped up those sentiments when he told me, Ruby, change people, change organizations. Under the Cabinet-approved Public Sector Learning and Development Policy and the Public Sector Learning Framework, mine has responsibility for helping to build a capable, values-driven public service, one that is responsive to the needs of all. And that responsibility requires us to be deliberate about how learning happens across the system. It also requires us to create the kinds of experiences and conversations and partnerships that really help to shape a better public service. And this webinar, as Prudence indicated earlier, forms part of a broader series being delivered in partnership with the JCPD. And I'm especially pleased that it represents not a one-time intervention, but a sustained and intentional effort to strengthen inclusive service across our public service. We know that, yes, meaningful change, especially when it involves mindset and behavior, it takes time. It takes engagement. It takes reinforcement. It takes reflection. And it takes the courage to do things differently. And so through this series and the series of webinars to come, MAN is signaling very clearly that we are here for the long haul. We are working alongside our partners to support the shifts required to build a more responsive, respectful, and inclusive public sector. In this context, the phrase all-inclusive, as reflected in the theme of this series, invites us to think beyond physical access alone. Yes, ramp matters. Yes, special parking matters. They matter very much. But true inclusion asks more of us. It asks us to think about the full human experience of the people we serve. It asks us to examine whether our policies, our procedures, our environments, and even our daily interactions genuinely reflect empathy, dignity, respect, and awareness of diverse needs and lived realities. It asks us, in a very real sense, to rethink what service excellence truly means. Within MAN itself, I'm happy to say that my team has already begun to reflect on and apply insights gained through our engagement with the JCPD. And that is leading to adjustments in how we deliver our own services. Yes, that is definitely encouraging for the team and for me as team lead. Because it reminds us that this work is not abstract. It is practical, it is relevant, and it is impactful. And so as we support the JCPD in advancing this agenda, we too are learning, we too are growing, and we too are being transformed. Importantly, this initiative also reflects how we understand learning within the public service. We often refer to the 70-20-10 model, which basically indicates that while formal training remains important, a significant portion of learning takes place through interaction, dialogue, exposure, and shared experience. And this engagement, it sits squarely within that 20%. It creates space for people to listen, to reflect, to be challenged, and to deepen their understanding, and to do so in ways that can directly influence how they lead and how they serve. And that matters. Yes, it really does. And so this morning, we are seeing representation from across almost the entire public service, our ministries, departments, and agencies, and across different levels of staff and leadership. We have over 200 persons on the platform right now. And that is a strong and encouraging signal. It tells me that there is recognition that these issues matter and that there is willingness to engage with them seriously. As we continue to build a modern public sector, inclusive service must not be seen as optional. It must be understood as a core element of service excellence, a core element of good governance and responsible leadership. And MAN, yes, we remain fully committed to supporting this journey through strategic partnerships, continued engagement, and learning experiences that helps to strengthen both mindset and practice across the public service. And so, my encouragement that all of us this morning engage actively and to reflect carefully on how the insights shared can be applied within our organizations and spheres of influence. And on that note, I say thanks, thank you so much for being here. And just lean in, engage, reflect carefully. Yes, inclusivity is what we are committed to. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. And Minister?
Morning, are you hearing me? Just testing.
Loud and clear, sir. But you
Wonderful.
look very far. That's
sure.
perfect, perfect.
Let me move the camera. That's too close.
That's it.
Right, yeah, good.
That is you, sir. That is it. Mhm.
Wonderful. Well, you're not sure if it's me or AI, who knows? We're living in that kind of world. But let me say good morning to everyone. All of the distinguished persons that are online. And just to acknowledge, of course, Dr. Hendricks, the JCPD, and Dr. Brown from MIND, and everyone else who is on this important webinar. I want to extend commendation to JCPD on behalf of the government and particularly the Ministry of Labor and Social Security that you're connected to, and also to MIND for really pulling together in partnership this, what I think is a timely and important initiative, a discussion that reflects the priority that we are placing as a ministry on these issues connected to persons with disabilities. This is what we talk about when we say deliberate and strategic steps forward, not just happening by coincidence, but happening based on our very coordinated steps to make sure that we strengthen capacity of the stakeholders, particularly across public service, as we hasten our steps to deliver service in a way that is just and fair and effective and inclusive and people-centered to the people that we are serving. And so today's theme is very, very on point. All-inclusive service, advancing beyond ramps and special parking. And when I saw it, I said, you know, it's a little cheeky, but it is Jamaica, in that they're saying we're doing something, but definitely have much more that we can do. And we all agree that we have seen some steps forward, but we have to now move beyond just those simple matters to challenge each other, to now move beyond the visible markers of accessibility to confronting the deeper truth, which is that inclusion is not merely about the concrete or the walls or the equipment. It is about our attitude. It's about the systems, it's about accountability. It's about how you approach these matters in your daily life and in your service. And as a government, we have to ensure that whatever we develop, policies, programs, anything we develop, not only that it's compliant with the law, but it is responsive to the lived realities and the practical challenges that persons with disabilities face on a daily basis. And this requires us then to shift from seeing it as obligation to ownership, which means we see ourselves as part and parcel of the group of persons owning this responsibility and moving from accommodation to intentional design. And these are things which will start to develop a culture in our country that will see us moving from passive awareness to what we define as active implementation. And that's something that should start at a very, very early stage and very, very early age. So what does progress look like? Globally, we're seeing a number of examples of what these systems look like in practice. We see Canada, where they have enacted national frameworks aimed at creating barrier-free societies with a very deliberate focus on accessible workplaces, public service, and technology. In Sweden, we see where inclusion is now embedded into the national systems through support for independent living for persons with disabilities, as well as inclusive education and universal design. So everything they do has to now, as a mandate, contemplate these issues in design and in operation. These are examples that demonstrate that real progress occurs when inclusion is not just treated as an add-on or as a separate element, but as a core principle of national development. And that's how we have to see it. I said it last week, and I'll repeat it, that if we stop seeing persons with disabilities as to the side and rather understand that we just need to remove the barriers so that they can have an opportunity to contribute to our productivity, then we will see this process as not just one where we are helping, but one where we are strengthening the national development opportunities and potential for our country. You have a lot of persons with disabilities who can and who want to significantly contribute in many different ways to many different sectors, which all in all will come together to boost our GDP. But it is because we have not created the environment where they can thrive. And that's really what our goal has to be, not just survive, but thrive. So this week, we met with High Commissioner Designate for Malta, George Borg, and he has spent all of his life, Dr. Hendricks, you were there with us in that meeting. He spent all of his professional life and career focused on persons with disabilities. And we used the opportunity to engage him in discussions on areas of mutual interest between Jamaica and Malta, areas where we can start to discuss, for instance, they don't have a disputes right tribunal in Malta. We can help them to, or guide them how our law has promulgated this very important institution. And they have many things there that we do not have, which we can learn from and also integrate. So we're going to advance those discussions, and I think at some point perhaps have an MOU which sets out the terms in a clear, delineated way to strengthen our discussion and our partnership with Malta and overall the focus on persons with disabilities. Moving on to the action for government. Government is advancing this agenda in a purposeful way. Even in our discussions around building out new spaces for the Ministry of Labour and Social Security, we are talking about purpose-built infrastructure that will, again, not just see this as an add-on element, but incorporate these designs into the core of the architectural structure. And to advance this through the ministry and through JCPD, we've introduced the I'm Able digital platform, which is supposed to improve access to services for all Jamaicans, particularly persons with disabilities. We are advancing also the National Disability Census, which we had discussions with PIOJ just this week around the importance of this. And so we're going to have to talk to Statin to see, will it be a separate census or survey, or will this be incorporated into the national census? But we need this data so that we can ensure the policies that we're making, Dr. Brown, are data-driven, evidence-based policies. We're also expanding training and employment pathways, and we continue to support accessibility audits, which are done across public institutions to make sure that the government is leading by example. And we have a far way to go, far way, but step by step, and we will be the ones aggressively pushing for this. We also recognize the role of technology in everything that we do. As we expand digital services, inclusion now must be built into their design and into all the designs across the various ministries and agencies. So no Jamaican should have the threat of being left behind in an increasingly digital society, because the digital society and the massive opportunities in technology are such that it provides a lot of innovation that removes barriers and provides spaces for all of us, including persons with disabilities and the wide range of persons with disabilities, to find their place in active society. So again, I want to acknowledge everyone who was a part of this process. This series is particularly significant because, again, in my view, it targets the very engine of national development, which is our public officers, persons who are serving across the length and breadth of our country. And I believe, Dr. Hendricks, that by equipping the ministries, departments, and agencies with the knowledge and the tools that are required for us to do this work, to embed inclusive practices in everything that we do, we are basically strengthening the institutional performance and advancing equity, which are two critical things for public service. We want to make sure that every year we are improving, we are doing what is necessary. And so even at the Ministry here of Labor and Social Security, we are committed to being the champions in government, to moving policies and programs forward so that we can provide opportunity, expand opportunity, remove the systemic barriers, and how, real progress is our focus. And real progress depends on collaboration. It depends on all of us, not just the Ministry of Labor, but all of us across government having behavioral change at every level, from leadership going straight down and straight across. So, in closing, I want to commend you. I want to encourage all of you who are participating online. I want you to know that you're not to keep this information within your heart and in your mind. You're to share as you learn. You are to teach. And I want this series not only to be a platform for dialogue, but I want it to be that catalyst, that engine to push measurable action. Because whenever inclusion becomes standard practice, then we know we are on the right track. And I use the example all the time of myself, where I am wearing glasses, and if I take off the glasses, I can't see the computer or the TV properly, far from me or at a distance. Years ago, that might have been seen as a very significant disability. But now, because glasses are so commonplace, most places you go, you have 3 out of 4 persons wearing glasses. So it is not even seen as a tool to treat a disability. It is just seen as standard, as normal. And that's really where we want to go with many of the other issues that persons have in the family of persons with disabilities. So much so that these innovation and the technology becomes so normal that is not even seen as any special consideration. And that's what we want. We don't want it to be seen as something on the side or something special over there. We want it to be seen as normal for our procedure in government to have at its core inclusion at all levels. That's what we want. That's what our goal is. So I want to thank you all. I'm looking forward to an extremely meaningful outcome here, and hoping that what will emerge from this engagement is inclusivity in action. One love. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Minister. Good morning, everyone. Today we have the ideal presenter to share on the topic, moving beyond physical accessibilities. A passionate advocate for the education and empowerment of persons with disabilities, Dr. Christine Hendricks is the current Executive Director of the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities, a statutory body established under the Disabilities Act, which came into effect in February 2022. With extensive local and international experience, Dr. Hendricks has been a dynamic speaker and presenter at workshops and seminars on various aspects of disability. As a member of the community of persons with disabilities, she has lent her considerable expertise and experience to the advisory and management boards on disabilities and the Abilities Foundation as a board member. She has also served on several working groups and committees, including the Task Force on Disabilities Sub-Sector Plan and the Task Force on Social and Vulnerable Groups, both part of Jamaica's Vision 2030. Her commitment to enhancing the overall well-being of Jamaica's children is rooted in the church and focuses on ingredients for a sound society, good parenting, and healthy marriages. Married for over 32 years, a qualified teacher and counselor, she holds a doctoral degree in transformational leadership with focus on cultural transformation and a master's in counseling psychology. It is with delight then that I present to you Dr. Christine Hendricks.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you so much, Mr. Sand, and welcome to today's series, the first of today's series, All-Inclusive Service, Advancing Beyond Ramps and Special Parking. It's such a privilege to be here this morning and to join with mine, Dr. Ruby Brown and her team, and our minister, our very focused and charged minister, whose passion is so delightful to see, for want of a better word. You know, it makes my heart smile when I know that I have a minister who is genuinely interested in the area of this, of service to persons with disabilities or very special citizens in Jamaica. And so it is with such great pleasure that I join you this morning, first of our series, and we look forward to the engagement. We have over 255 persons online and growing, and I look forward to the conversation going forward. And so as we move into the session, we will have a pre-test, and at the end, we will have a post-test just to see how much you would have learned through the process. We will also have an icebreaker before I go into the presentation. So here goes. All right, if you can take, oh, let me just share my presentation. I trust that everyone is seeing it and it is in the mode that I need it to be in. Slideshow.
Just switch, right, almost. Perfect, Dr. Hendricks, perfect.
Nice. Thank you so very much. And so, inclusive service delivery for persons with disabilities, moving beyond physical accessibility towards a society where every citizen can fully participate. And so we're moving into our pre-test just before our icebreaker to find out how much you know. So take 5 minutes. The link will be placed in the chat and you can answer the 6 questions that will appear in the chat or in the link. Let me know if you are able to access it.
Yes, it's accessible.
Great. So I'll time you. So you have 5 minutes to answer these 6 questions. Are the participants able to put up their hands as soon as they are through so I can know how we're progressing?
They are able to raise their hands, Dr. Hendricks.
Okay, awesome. All right, so we have 2.5 minutes to go. I'm not seeing them from my side, so you can let me know how the raised hands are going to see how we're progressing.
Nine persons have raised their hands so far, Doc.
Oh, wow. Come on, everyone. We have a minute.
It's climbing, it's climbing.
Oh,
19,
nice.
20, 20, it's climbing.
We have a minute to go.
About a third.
Let's go. We have some seconds to go.
Yes, yes, it's moving now, it's moving.
Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so your time is up. I trust that you did very well in that pre-test, and we will take the test again later to see how much you have learned. I will not ask you any of the answers right now until later on you can tell me. All right, so we are going right into our icebreaker, and this icebreaker is called Step Forward. So what I want you to do for me, we're going to take each of the questions and you are going to type in the chat, step forward if the statement relates to you or applies to you. Okay, I trust I am clear. So you're going to step forward, but on paper, right? So you're going to pretend that you're in the line, but you're going to type step forward if the statement applies to you. So the first statement, 1, you have used the government website or online portal in the last 30 days without difficulty. If that applies to you, type step forward in the chat. Second, you have attended a public meeting, town hall, or official event where all information was communicated in a format you could easily understand. Type step forward if it applies to you. 3, you have never had to ask someone to assist you in completing an official government form or document. Step forward if the statement applies. Are our people stepping forward?
Full throttle ahead, Doc. Plenty steps.
Nice.
Step.
Number 4, you work in an environment where colleagues with different abilities could perform their roles without requesting any special accommodation. Step forward.
We're getting some specific step forward for some questions, but not for others.
Nice, nice.
Mhm.
And 5, you have received a public service, whether in health, education, justice, housing, without your ability to communicate or move over a barrier. So you have received a public service, whether in health, education, justice, or housing, without your ability to communicate or move over a barrier. I trust that most, if not all, persons were able to step forward. For all 5, do we have any person who was able to step forward without, hitching? You stepped forward with confidence because each of the statements applied to you. Can you help me, Prudence?
Yes, I'm looking through.
Did we have
And you're saying
anybody that?
somebody's just asking for a little bit more clarification on question number 5.
All right, so you have received a public service, education, health, justice, or housing, without your ability to communicate or move over a barrier.
All right.
So you didn't have any challenges in receiving the service. You just went through school, no problem. Go to the hospital, clinic, no problem. Go into the justice system, no problem. Similar housing, no problems. You have your money, you can buy your house, or you can access a loan to get one.
Yes, we have a Tawana that has 5 yes. Tawana Roden. Carrie K says she had 5, but she's stepping back on question 5. So
She had challenges with the house, don't
she
it? All right.
took a step back.
All right. So the aim of this icebreaker is to help us to understand that we, for the most part, persons without disabilities can easily move through life without barriers. But for many persons with disabilities, if they were in the space or if we were in person together, you would find that there are some persons that for the majority of these statements, they could not step forward because supports are usually required or the barriers are so high that they are unable to whether utilize the platform or understand the information that is being provided to them. So I trust that you enjoyed that step forward and you will consider, as you move around, as you move along life's journey, some things that you may take for granted, how there are others that might not be able to do so or similar to your experience, might not have the same experience as you. And so who are we talking about as we look at advancing beyond ramps and rails and special parking? Who are we talking about when we speak of all-inclusive services? First of all, for us to understand that it is important. Inclusive service delivery demands all of our attention. It is not something for the JCPD or for the ministry or for Mind only. Disability includes all of us in one way, shape, or form. And did you know 15% of the world's population live with some form of disability, which means that many persons on this platform may have a family member or you're in close relation with someone who has a disability. whether a friend, a church sister, a neighbor, somebody in the bus that you travel to work, on the street, somewhere along the journey, there is someone with a disability that you are close to. And in developing countries, 80% of persons with disabilities live in developing countries. And so Jamaica being a developing world's population live with some form of disability. Of these persons live in developing countries. Quite a number live in Jamaica. And so disability is not a minority concern. It is not something, as persons would say, you go to the shop and you order, or you order online. It's not something that you choose. You're born with a disability as part of the human condition. And so it touches every family, every community. And so every government institution should have this mandate to ensure that persons with disabilities are served. So when we talk about persons with disabilities, who are we talking about exactly? We have a Disabilities Act that was passed in the Parliament in 2014 and became effective in 2022 February. And it defines a person with a disability as a person who has a long-term physical, mental, intellectual, or sensory impairment, which may hinder his full and effective participation in society on an equal basis with other persons. And so these are the persons that we're talking about, persons who are blind or visually impaired, persons who are deaf or hard of hearing, persons with intellectual disabilities, persons with mental disabilities or psychosocial disabilities, persons with developmental disabilities like autism, Down syndrome, and persons with physical disabilities. And incidentally, it's very interesting that we're having this conversation today, because today we are celebrating International Down Syndrome Day. And I'm sure, and I'm hoping, so I am sure, but I'm also hoping that in every workplace we are recognizing this day as International Down Syndrome Day, and you have on your happy socks, because today in celebration, and today is also World Happiness or International Happiness Day. And so in celebration of that, we wear happy socks. So those are those very, very colorful socks to ensure that we are celebrating persons with Down syndrome, because they bring such joy to families and to communities. If you know somebody who has Down syndrome, you would know that. All right, so now that we know who we are talking about, do we have any legal obligation to persons with disabilities as a country and as public servants? Of course. And so we have our legal framework takes in the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities that Jamaica ratified in 2007. We have our Disabilities Act, as we mentioned earlier. We have the Sustainable Development Goals of leaving no one behind, and we have a CARICOM Disability Inclusion Strategy. Before I go into those, I am taking them one at a time so that we can know a little bit more about our legal obligations. And so the first one I will take up is the Disabilities Act. What is this act? What it is about? What is it about? Of course, this Disabilities Act outlines the rights and freedoms of persons with disabilities. how it is that they should be included in society in a nutshell. And so there are key provisions in this act. And I'll just go through the different parts so that you are aware. And in your own time, you can go through it to see how it applies to each of you on the line. So part 1 takes in the preliminary section and the definitions. It defines a disability. It defines words like reasonable arrangements. What's that? It defines discrimination, and it shares the duty of care that the state has to bear as a society to persons with disabilities. Part 2 speaks of the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities, which is represented by me and my colleagues here who are also online. And it establishes the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities as the oversight body corporate to ensure the implementation of this act. And so part of this discourse this morning is part of adhering to the provisions of this act, because it does say that public awareness is very important, understanding that not everyone fully understands what it means to include a person with a disability in daily life. Part 3 speaks of the rights and protection. It speaks of the protection against discrimination in employment, in education and training, in health care and health facilities, and in public life. Part 5 speaks about accessibility standards. It mandates accessible infrastructure, transportation, communication, and of course, digital systems. Recently, along with the Bureau of Standards, the ICT accessibility standards were launched, and it provides a guide, an outline as to how to ensure that all our digital systems are accessible. And you know the beauty about it? When we make society accessible for persons with disabilities, we end up making it accessible for all. And persons who are senior citizens, children, parents who are persons who are pregnant, parents with young children, people with heavy loads to carry, people who may have broken a foot or a toe, will tell you that they benefit from the accessible infrastructure. And if we had accessible transportation and communication systems that were intended for persons with disabilities. And that's what we call universal design, designing to ensure that everybody can use it. You know, while of course there may be specialized uses or specialized buttons that you have to turn on, like your phone. Many of us have the most up-to-date phones, and within the settings of the phone, you will have accessible features. So if you need it, you can use it. And if you don't, you can turn it off. Universal design. Part 5 speaks of enforcement and penalties. It speaks about the complaint mechanisms, which is the Disabilities Rights Tribunal, and the JCPD, which is the first point of contact that the complaints are made. And of course, there are penalties for non-compliance. And part 6 speaks of the role of the JCPD and other government bodies like yours, like the ones that you represent here today. Your responsibility, your role in ensuring that the Disabilities Act is adhered to and persons with disabilities can participate in life. So we spoke about the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And you know, I remember when I was much younger, long before I would have known even about the council, and I hear about convention. In the church circles, a convention is a big, massive meeting of the minds, and meeting to worship and to set guidelines and so on and so forth, different aspects of that big meeting. But as I, matured in the space and learned, I recognize that a convention in this instance, in the UN, in the UN language, is a document. And this document speaks to the rights of persons with disabilities. In 2009, I had the privilege of traveling to Japan, and I met with several persons who were part of the journey of drafting that convention. And our Professor Senator Floyd Morris was part of that set of, or those set of persons that helped to craft this international human rights treaty that sets the standard for disabilities rights. Now, Jamaica, having ratified the convention and signed and ratified the convention in 2007, made the next necessary step, which was to do our own local, to craft and accept and adopt and pass our own Disabilities Act as our standard for disabilities rights. And what the convention, and both the convention and the Disabilities Act does, is that it shifts the look at disability, moving away from the medical model, the charity model, to a rights-based model. Most of us might remember a time when you think of a person with a disability, you would think of someone who is begging, someone who is not in school, someone who family members powder and pamper and takes care of them, and they are just home. However, in 2007, when Jamaica ratified this convention, it marked a time, a shift to say we are no longer going to be keeping our people with disabilities in the background. They are moving forward as human beings with rights. And so they are enabled to have, to be part of society, to participate in society as anyone else in Jamaica or any other country across the world where persons with disabilities, or any country that would have ratified this convention or even signed this convention. And so we are happy for that shift, because that shift gives strength to Jamaica's stance on disability, and gives strength to our implementation of this convention and the Disabilities Act. You may not know, but every year the JCPD has to represent Jamaica on your behalf, because of how we to share with the world how we are implementing this convention. So when we ask for reports from the Ministry of Health and from the Ministry of Transportation and from Ministry of Education and other ministries, agencies, and departments, it is to help to make up this report to say to the world that Jamaica is serious in ensuring that the rights of persons with disabilities are upheld. And so some critical articles in the convention that I would just want to mention. Now I said that it is a document, and it has 50 articles. I won't name out the 50 articles this morning, but I'll just pick out select six for our conversation today. And so Article 5 speaks of equality and non-discrimination, and it outlines what the state of Jamaica has to do to ensure that that persons with disabilities are not discriminated against, and that they are treated on an equal basis, or there is equity, because some persons will tell you that if it is equal, then persons with disabilities who have been so far behind will not be equal, will not have the same access because they need so much more to bring them on a level platform. And so equity is the word, and non-discrimination moving forward. Article 9 speaks of accessibility. And a lot of us, when we think of accessibility, we think of ramps and rails, don't it? Yes, we do. I know we do. Once somewhere has a ramp, we think that, yes, this place is accessible. Well, you know, I have found in my time that there are ramps, but they're not really ramps. They end up being slopes because they're not built to standards. And sometimes they do not even have rails. And sometimes, okay, fine, there's a ramp that is to standard. But when you get to the door, you have to step inside. And when you go inside, the levels of the customer service desk is at one height. They're all at the same height. And so if I am short or if I am in a wheelchair, the person at the counter will not be able to interact with me at face level. There is a consideration within this Article 9 that there are some things that must be in place before or whether or not any person with a disability will access the space. So it should be the normal route or the normal way we build, the normal or the regular way in which we develop our infrastructure. You don't have to have a person with a disability coming into your space for it to be made accessible. And then there are some aspects of disability that it requires individual, it responds to the individual need. And so I am deaf, and so I will need a sign language interpreter. But a sign language interpreter is not necessarily needed for everyone. So having a ramp, having an elevator, having 2 levels of desk should be the norm. However, having a sign language interpreter is not necessarily the norm for everybody because not everyone is deaf or uses sign language. Article 19 speaks of independent living. Now, most persons might cringe, even parents might cringe at this article because they're thinking, how am I going to allow my child to live independently in the community? Not very many persons in the past used to even take their children or family members out alongside them into the community, much more allowing them to live independently. What? The convention encourages and says to states parties like Jamaica, persons with disabilities should have the right to live independently in their community. Of course, there are some persons who will need support. And the same Japan experience in 2009 taught me that independent living does not necessarily mean that you are living independently and there is no support. Because I saw persons with severe disabilities, severe cerebral palsy, severe developmental disabilities who were married or lived on their own. Government provided for that. The homes were retrofitted to enable them to live independently. However, they had 24, depending on the need, they had either 24-hour volunteer service or 12-hour volunteer service or shift care volunteer service as needed. And so independent living can be considered as so many different areas because disability, it's not one size that fits all when we speak of disability. If you remember, the diversity of disability that I explained about earlier, you will understand that not everybody needs the same things. Everybody do not need the same or does not need the same things. Article 24 speaks of inclusive education. We're moving there, but we're not there yet. And inclusive education speaks to enabling persons with disabilities to go through the formal education system like everyone else. And based on the need, there are supports provided or there are pullouts for assessments and build up and interventions, and then we put them back into the formal education system. I'm hoping one day we can indicate that Jamaica has done it, that we have more and more inclusive schools. We do have some, but not very many. Article 27 speaks about work and employment. And it says of states parties that persons with disabilities should not be discriminated in terms of being engaged in meaningful work and employment. A lot of times, people with disabilities, even if they are employed, they are usually at the first tier of the employment level. They come in as an office attendant or a telephone operator, and they retire there. Training and development is not provided for. They do not have that opportunity to move up and to be promoted as others in the environment, in the work environment. And so Article 27 speaks to that. And it also speaks to it in our Disabilities Act. Of course, reasonable arrangements is very critical to some persons with a disability within the workspace and within the employment sphere. Article 33 speaks of national implementation and monitoring. And so part of this discourse this morning is to ensure that everyone on the line, I'm not sure if we've reached 500 as yet, but as many of us that are on the line and in your ministries, you should leave asking the question, do I have a person with a disability working here? Or are we ensuring that we're not discriminating? Are our spaces accessible? Are our websites accessible? Is that child going to school? If not, why not? Right? I want us to leave thinking seriously and then move beyond thinking into action. Another framework that speaks to disability in our country is Vision 2030, and maybe some of you didn't know that. But Vision 2030, Jamaica's National Development Plan, has a disability subsector plan. And it says that persons with disabilities and disability inclusion are critical for our national development. If it is that people with disabilities are not included in our society, Vision 2030 would have failed. And even if we move Vision 2030 to Vision 2050 or 2060, and people with disabilities are left out, we would have failed as a country. And I know that because Jamaica is a very proud place and we want people to know that we do things well when we do it, we want to ensure that disability inclusion is one of those things that we do well. And so the national goal speaks to empowering productive citizens and ensuring that persons with disabilities are active participants in economic and social life. So we move away from begging, we move away from tokenism, we move away from just a handout, and we really serve and allow people with disabilities to do business. So when they turn up at a bank or a credit union, they can get a loan like everybody else. They can open their businesses if they are business minded. I'm sure maybe on social media, some of us may have seen persons with disabilities who have their own car wash facility. They have their own farms. They have their own factories, and they are employing other people and including people with disabilities. I recall earlier last year, one of our clients who received an economic empowerment grant, he started with a small business and it has developed and he has mushroomed into doing various aspects of that or different aspects of businesses. He has just launched himself out till he has wine, he has liqueur, he has not soft goods but other materials that he makes, and he does his business and he is doing very well. National Goal 3 of Vision 2030 speaks of effective governance, strengthening the institutional capacity of the JCPD and other related bodies, and of course, strengthening government to ensure that persons with disabilities are served and served well. Because yes, the JCPD started as a department within the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, and it has moved to now being a body corporate as a statutory body within the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, building our capacity. And I'm sure there is so much more that can be achieved, and so much more and so much further that we can go as our capacity develops. And what I want us to understand is that disability matters is not a matter for the JCPD alone. Every single person on this platform has a role to play. And so National Goal 3 speaks to all of us, strengthening your institution capacity to serve persons with disabilities. The education sector speaks to inclusive education and training systems that accommodate learners with disabilities from pre-primary straight to post-secondary. Because people with disabilities, once they get the ability, or once they are allowed the opportunity, I should say, to move across the education system, the sky is the limit, I tell you. And so our education sector therefore impacts our labor market. And so why aren't we seeing people with disabilities in the labor market? Could it be that they are not in education? I wonder. But Vision 2030 Disability Subsector Plan addresses the labor market in terms of enabling us to increase the employment rates for persons with disabilities through targeted programs, incentives, and enforcement. I noticed that there is a national project that is ongoing called Spiro. And as part of in the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, and part of that Spiro project is building a system to ensure that people all of Jamaica, including people with disability, have a transitional path from education into the labor market. I am so excited. It speaks to the built environment as well. And I spoke earlier, because the built environment is important. And though we're saying that this conversation is more than the built environment is important. Because if I cannot get in, or when I get in, I cannot maneuver the space, or if the benefit is available, but I'm not able to access it or utilize it, then there is some discrimination taking place, unknowingly, but discrimination nonetheless, because I am leaving out persons with disabilities. It is very important that there is a monitoring and evaluation framework. Disability data currently is so sparse, even in the Council for Persons with Disabilities. I will tell you, our data will show, if it is that as a developing country, we have 15% of our population that has a disability, it tells me that about 450,000 plus persons in Jamaica have a disability. Does the JCPD have that number? No, we don't. Does the census have that number? No, it doesn't. And so it is very important for us to have disability disaggregated data being collected so that we can plan better, so that we can track the progress of disability inclusion in Jamaica. And I look forward that as you serve the forms that you have, the digitalization and the digitization that is taking place in your organizations, that you're ensuring that you're capturing disability just like how you would be capturing, are you a male or are you a female? Disability disaggregated data is critical to Jamaica's development. Now, the Sustainable Development Goals is a global agenda that commits to leaving no one behind. And if we're not leaving anybody behind, it is saying that we are not leaving people with disabilities behind either. And so if we go right across the 17 goals, you will find persons with disabilities right there. I know that I've picked out 6. I have SDG 1 that speaks to no poverty, SDG 4 that speaks to quality education, 8 that speaks to decent work, 10 that speaks to reduced inequalities, 11 that speaks to sustainable cities, and SDG 17 that speaks to partnership. But every single one of these goals relate to persons with disabilities. Because when we think of safe water, people with disabilities need safe water. And when we speak of industry, persons with disabilities are right there. And so I do not want us to limit persons with disabilities to say, oh, they can only do this or they can only do that. My same experience of 2009 was the first time I was meeting a deaf lawyer. Yes, you heard me right. I said a deaf lawyer. And so persons with disabilities needn't be boxed, put in a box to say, this is all that you can do. And the person who I spoke about who had cerebral palsy, the gentleman was married. He had 2 children and he worked. And not only that, he was a professional wrestler. Let me tell you something. People with disabilities are not to be put in a box. And so we look forward to disability inclusion. So when we talk about a framework for inclusive public service beyond the ramps and the rails and the parking signs, and just let me say something quickly about the parking signs. I know persons across Jamaica, we have a good heart. And we want to ensure that there is inclusion. And we set up the parking space and we sometimes put up the sign or we, label it with the international accessible design symbol. However, the parking space is the same size as the regular parking spaces. However, built to standard, you will recognize that a parking space should be a time and a half, 1.5 times a regular parking space. And you know why? If I use a wheelchair and I have to get out of my vehicle, I will need space to open the door, to have my wheelchair beside me so that I can independently transition from my car seat into my wheelchair. Or like those vehicles that I saw in Japan, the wheelchair is built in as a car seat. So when I get out and when I reach my destination, I can, park the car, release the lever, slide myself out, and the wheels of the wheelchair is just released, like the plane wheel when it is landing, and I go about my business. I need space to move around. And of course, those parking spaces should be closest to the entrance of the building, not put way over there so that the wheelchair have to be be pushed or, be moving from very far to get to the entrance. It should be as close, in very close proximity to the entrance. And of course, you know that there must be a ramp built to standards. All right. So what are we talking about when we talk about inclusive public service beyond the access, the physical accessibility? First of all, it's an attitude change. It's a mindset change. And part of today is part of that endeavor to ensure that we shift our mindset from limiting people with disabilities to allow them to be part of everything and everyday life. And so disability inclusive training should be part of your orientation in your organization. And everybody who is onboarded must learn about disability inclusion and people with disabilities. It must be embedded within your training framework. That is the first aspect of building an inclusive public service. The next aspect of the framework is digital inclusion. Now, as Jamaica, we're moving online at a pace that is unknown to man. The younger people, this is where their life is. And for those of us who are a little older, we struggle, but we have to use it because that is where government is. However, we have to ensure that the e-services that we are providing online are built to standards. We have a world standard that speaks to how these websites and e-services, and it's not only websites, it is even social media. We are putting social media out there, or we're putting information out there, and we want a large audience. We want a large following. And so if you want a large following, remember you have 450,000 people with disabilities that we have not yet tapped into. And so those e-services allow for screen reader portals. They allow for captioned videos. And for some persons who are deaf, whose English is not their first language, caption is good, but they might have a challenge. And so we have websites that may have sign language interpretation attached to it. And something that everybody can benefit from? Plain language content. Simple, easy, everybody can understand. A language that is easy to read, that we don't have to run to Google to find out what that word means. Easy language means everybody can take it up, or everybody can look at it and participate because they understand the language. Easy language. Next, we have communication access. Now, this is a part of inclusion that many persons struggle with. Sign language interpretation in Jamaica is a necessity because we have 75,000 and more persons who are deaf or hard of hearing, who may know sign language and would need to access information. And so sign language interpretation at public hearings is important. So when we're putting out a video, when we're doing advertisement, any ad, it should have sign language interpretation. When we're doing the newscast, sign language interpretation should be there. Because recently at the launch of the ICT accessible standards, we had a panel discussion. And one of our deaf participants, he shared the difficulty getting information from news. The newscast every evening is something that we either choose to watch or we choose not to watch. But people who are deaf don't have that choice. They have to await people to listen first, and then tell them. And you and I know that sometimes when we get the information second hand and third hand, a lot of the information is missing. And so, what if there's a disaster? What if there's a curfew? What if they need to know, do not drive on Marcus Garvey Drive today because there's a shootout or there's an accident? But because they didn't hear it on the news, they end up on Marcus Garvey Drive and could end up in crossfire or end up wasting time sitting in traffic because they cannot move. Communication is important. When I go to the doctor as a deaf person, I don't want the doctor to talk to my mother or father or cousin, and then my cousin tell me, because my relatives could very well be telling me something that the doctor never tell them. So I want an independent person, or it would be good if the doctor themselves knew sign language. And so I'm looking forward to the day when sign language is just part of the language that we learn, just like how we learn Spanish and French when we go to school. And not only sign language, we need to ensure that all information that we have for the public is easy to read, simple language, or in picture format. Did you recognize that nowadays, when you go to the furniture store and you see something so nicely laid out, when you purchase it, you don't get it bought as nicely laid out, When you get a box that you can put in your car, and when you go home, you have to take out the manual and put that together. If you notice the manuals actually have very few words, but they have pictures to guide us. Nothing beats a picture. And so in our communication, if we can use a picture that relates to the word, or maybe you can have the picture and the word, so you have the word exit, and you have a figure of a human walking out. That is exit, and anybody can know that, even if I don't know what that word is. I can see that the person going that way or the arrow pointing that way, and so I know that I should go left or I should go right. Communication access. This is something that not very many persons think about. When I go into a fast food restaurant, I want to be able to make up my own mind into what I want to eat. But sometimes I have to squint to see the words. And it is the same thing for other information that is out there. You're communicating with the public, but we have to squint. Or if we don't have on glasses, the Lord help us. We have to ask somebody, is what that right up there, so? So it should be large enough, easy to read, picture format, whatever, just making it easy for everybody, and people with disabilities benefit. And of course, there is audio. So when I'm standing in line or I'm sitting and waiting at the bank, along with the number system coming up on the screen, I am also hearing it, so that if I am blind and my cousin beside me is deaf, I can hear and he can see. All right, so communication access, very important. Then there is legal empowerment to persons with disabilities. I don't know if you're aware, but there is a disabilities rights tribunal. I would have said it earlier in talking about the framework of the Disabilities Act. Yes, there is a grievance mechanism that persons with disabilities can use. Come to the JCPD, the first stop, being discriminated against, make a complaint. And if the matter meets the threshold of discrimination and cannot be resolved by alternate dispute resolution, it can go to the tribunal, who will then adjudicate the matter. So people with disabilities have rights and they have power. Sometimes they don't know. And so, as part of the learning process for our public, we also have to, on the other hand, ensure that our people with disabilities know about their rights. And of course, what we have been talking about all morning is universal design, or engineers, and those who are creative thinkers. Ensure that as you are designing, you engage the population of persons with disabilities. Talk to us, man. Say something, so that as you design, nothing about us without us. You are not just designing for one set of people, but you're designing so that everybody can benefit. So now that you see what this framework of inclusive public service looks like, starting with the attitude change and moving into universal design, what are some of the gaps that we face as a nation? We have been talking about it. In health, in the healthcare sector, we spoke about it, sign language interpretation. The infrastructure and the information sometimes is inaccessible. In terms of mental health, I know that we are getting better at, or there is a lot of discussions now about mental health, and it has become a national conversation. But ensuring that persons with mental disabilities, psychosocial disabilities, are provided for, even in the workspace. I know that many employers shy away. I don't want them persons there in here, because when whatever happens, I don't know what to do. However, many persons with psychosocial disabilities or mental disabilities, if and when they're on medication, for the most part, they are functional. They are functional. And so let us not put us in a box. Employment, the gaps, hiring practices. How many of us, when we put out our ads, recruiting, do we consider, is person with disabilities able to access this information, whether on my website or in the Gleaner? When I am doing my interviews, do I ensure that I ask, are there any special arrangements that would need to be made? And then when the persons turn up, the questions are not diverted to their disability, but to the matter at hand, to what it is that they'd be required to do. So yes, maybe you might ask a question about a disability so that you can understand, but that is not the focus of the conversation. Currently, persons with disabilities are at a disadvantage in terms of employment. The last count was 15% of the population of persons with disabilities are employed. And what does that say? 85% are outside of the labor market. And it does not necessarily mean all the 85% are severe cases of disability. I told you about the severe cases elsewhere, and I know that we're saying that is Japan, or that is Singapore, or that is Canada, or that is elsewhere. But as we prepare our education sector and our trading sector to prepare our people for inclusion, then our labor market will become an inclusive space. I cannot speak more about education, but another aspect of the shortage is the trained educators, whether trained as special educators or trained specialists. The physiotherapy, not physiotherapy, because we have a school of physiotherapy here, but the speech therapists, the occupational therapists, and so on. The limited assistive technology in the classroom, and how we would have built our classrooms or our schools over the years. I am happy that we had some time ago the ramp in schools, and I'm sure it will continue as a project, a national imperative moving forward to ensure that is not only a ramp, but the bathrooms are accessible. The playgrounds are accessible and inclusive. Housing. Along with the housing trust, the JCPD, there is a percentage of housing within the housing developments of the National Housing Trust that's reserved for persons with disabilities. But guess what? Many of them cannot access this benefit. And why? If you're not employed, then housing, access to housing becomes a challenge. And the two, on the market, except there is an international construction company, a lot of times the developments are not necessarily built using the principle of universal design. Some years ago, I have a disability, but nothing is wrong with my feet that I cannot move around my house and step into a bath and so on. But some years ago, I had to do surgery. And the bathtub that was a natural step into for me became a barrier. I found it so difficult to even step in. I had to have a ladder to climb into the bath. And so as we build, where do we put the light switch? What kind of door handles? A lot of times we see the round knobs as door handles rather than the handle that whether you can grip it or not, or even if I have if it is a stump I have, I can use a stump and press down and go in. Or it opens. There is accessible openings. It opens electronically so I can move through. In the justice system, sign language interpretation, again, inaccessible legal documents and legislations. And in detention facilities, we have so many people with mental disabilities because they can't defend themselves, or intellectual disabilities because they cannot explain. And so those are some of the things that we need to address. We spoke about the platforms earlier to ensure that as we go digital, people with disabilities can participate. Now, how do we ensure that in our workspaces, we are making reasonable, or we are providing reasonable arrangements? First of all, what on earth is a reasonable arrangement? So although we have been talking about it, it is a modification to an environment, to a job description, to a service provision. It's a modification to anything enabling a person with a disability to participate fully without causing undue hardship to the organization or to the person, let me say that. So in terms of the physical workspace, we spoke about it: ramps, accessible parking, adjustable desks, accessible bathrooms, good lighting. Who knew that good lighting that all of us benefit from is a reasonable arrangement? Yes, man. And signage. So sometimes we go into some spaces, and when we are being directed, we are told at the front desk, go down the corridor, take the second right, and then take the third left. And then you go up the stairs, and on the left, there is a door or a glass door that you can walk into. If there was signage and arrows directing me to where I should go, I could not be confused with all of that explanation. So signage is important. Technology and tools, screen readers, voice to text. Now, WhatsApp and text is something that we all use, but that is a tool for many persons with disabilities. Or tablets that we use is a technology tool for many persons with developmental disabilities and even speech impairments. Amplified phones, we know that we have the accessibility feature that we can just turn on the buttons that we need and select, the areas that we need. Large print or braille documents. You know what? There is a pharmacy that when you pick up your prescription, on the bottle or on the envelope that the tablets are in, it is written, but it is also in braille, so that the person who is blind can know what it is that they are taking. Technology has moved beyond that, though, that the phone is such a tool that you scan, and then based on the app that is utilized, the phone or the app can read through the app, the information on the envelope or on the bottle can be read to you. There are quite a number of blind chefs. And this tool of using their phone to read ingredients and to guide them in the kitchen is what is so useful and allows for independence. And it can be useful in the workspaces. Schedules and duties. Flexible hours. Well, that is a good thing that the government has now adopted. Flexible hours. There was a time when flexible hours was not considered, but people with disabilities benefit from flexible hours or modified duties or shifting a job description. For some, it's extra break to allow for particular those who use wheelchairs or those with mental health issues who might need to take a break out of an environment. And all of us need to take a break, as a matter of fact. But these schedules and modification of duties allow for persons with disabilities to be employed without making the arrangement look like it is special, it is only for them. Remote work arrangements. There was a time when remote work was very remote to us here in Jamaica. However, because it has become the norm, COVID took place and remote work has become part of our norm. And so no longer do you have to say that for this person to work, they have to come into an office. Once there are targets set and there's a monitoring system in place, then remote work can happen just as if the persons were in the office. Communication, sign language interpreters at the staff meetings, whether online or in person. For fire alarms, not only having them visual, but also audio, or having audio attached to them. When we are, if there are messages being run on a loop within a setting, you sit in customer service and they are running the benefits that you can get. Having audio descriptors, making sure that the information is easy, so that everybody in the space can understand and participate. Support and training. And we speak of disability awareness for colleagues, ensuring that if you are employing a person with disability, the space is prepared before the individual comes. And when the individual comes, they are not only welcomed, but the various reasonable arrangements would have already been in the space for them. For some disabilities, like intellectual disabilities, it is body systems in place that allow for, somebody to be accountable for this individual, or someone that they can go to if they need any additional support. Additional training time when trainings are being provided. In terms of assessments and processes, accessible application forms. Many of us are putting our forms now, we're digitizing our forms, ensuring that it is accessible. For those that might be in training and have assessments to do, there's extra time provided for those tests. And interview formats. Not everybody have to come in you know, we are now doing interviews online. And so the workspace has become so much more dynamic, which can facilitate persons with disabilities. So, as government, what is our role aside from all that we have spoken about before? Heads of government, ministries, agencies, ministers, cabinet or prime minister, ministers or leaders. Mandate number one. So 6 strategic imperatives for heads of government. Mandate disability impact assessment, disability impact assessments. So all legislation that is being written or reviewed, all public service reforms that are being reviewed, there should be a disability impact assessment. The JCPD can help with that disability impact assessment, or as we develop our capacity to enable us to help with that, ensuring that these new legislation, the public, the services, the policies that are undergoing reviews, we are a part, the JCPD is part of providing that support. Over the past years, since we have the JCPD become a body corporate, and we have our unit that deals with policy research and project management, that unit has been very instrumental in helping across the public sector with the various policies that you are reviewing or drafting to ensure that inclusion is right there, focused and centered. Invest in accessible digital infrastructure. So we have an ICT authority within the Ministry of Investment, and MIC, Ministry of, can somebody help me? Ministry of Investment, Industry, and Commerce. They are where, that is the ministry that the Bureau of Standards falls under. And recently I did tell you that the Bureau of Standards launched the ICT accessible standards. And so what we are pushing for, or what this imperative is indicating, that not only should there be this accessible standards in the Bureau of Standards and the JCPD pioneering it, but every single government portal should be tested against these standards to ensure that they are accessible. So there should be audits to ensure that every government portal is accessible, and ensuring that within the Bureau of Standards too, there is an accessibility unit. So the JCPD with its accessibility unit, but because the Bureau of Standards is the national standards body, ensuring too that both the JCPD and the Bureau of Standards can collaborate in establishing that national digital accessibility unit. Number 3 in the strategic imperative, build human capacity across the public sector. Mandate disability awareness training for all public servants, frontline workers. And we should move further to ensure that there is a certified disability inclusion officer. Start with one. But if it is that it's a large ministry, ensure that there are more than one certified disability inclusion officers, so that when we are reporting across government, disability is not lost. When we request international reports, disability is not lost, or we are not searching to find information. Ensuring that whatever it is that we're considering as we plan strategically and our operational plan, that disability inclusion is embedded in there. Number 4, to strengthen the JCPD's mandate by providing the resources and elevating our enforcement powers, having a direct line to cabinet in terms of our reporting, that there's an eye on disability in Jamaica. Because remember, we ratified the convention, and it is not just the Ministry of Labor and Social Security that is mandated to report. Yes, they are mandated to report on behalf of the government. Cabinet, the discussion in cabinet should include disability inclusion right there, front and center. And number 5, establish disaggregated national data collection. Yes, statin. We have been talking for years, decades maybe. But aside from statin, ensure that every single form that we are collecting data on people, that disability is right there next to gender, male or female, disability right there. So right across, there is that collection of data, so that we can ensure that as we plan, we're planning purposefully for the inclusion of persons with disabilities. Many persons with disabilities could pass through the training systems and we don't know. The service delivery systems and we don't know. Can't give an account. And so data is important. And ensuring that Jamaica, we love to be first in everything. So the imperative is a challenge. I don't know if Minister is still here, but I know that we can say it to him afterwards. Champion Jamaica as the regional Caribbean, the Caribbean leader in disability inclusion. And for us to lead a CARICOM-wide inclusive service framework, starting with that first Caribbean Summit on disability inclusive governance. And you see, when we put it for 27, 28, maybe some of you are laughing at me, but it is not impossible. If we put our hearts in it and we put our shoulder to the wheel, it can happen in 27, 28. So let's champion right across the region. I know that Barbados and Grenada and all of them, Trinidad, they have persons with disabilities in those countries are rising in government, in the Senate, in politics, in public life. Jamaica, man, we need to champion. Senator Floyd Morris is the one person. I'm not talking about me as the head of the JCPD, but I'm talking championing at that level of government, right there, sitting beside those who make the policies and the laws. Yes, man, we need to ensure that we have such a system, such a framework in place that Jamaica can push that disability inclusive agenda forward across the region. Yes, man, that summit. Minister, that summit. And so as we look forward to these imperatives becoming a reality, each of us, we might not be the head of government in our spaces, but there is something that you can do living here today. Let it not just be a talk shop. Let it not be that you just come and listen to me for this hour, or you're part of this conversation or engagement for this 2 hours. Let it not be just a passing webinar. It's just a webinar. And you leave and you go back home being the same. Do not allow it. I know that it is an awareness session, but let this awareness session transcend beyond today. I look forward to hearing from you, and I look forward to the continued partnership with Mind as we continue to build an inclusive public sector service excellence all the way. I thank you. But before I go, I have one more slide for you, and this is for your participation, and that is to tell me, what have you learned from this discussion today? So we have another 5 minutes for you to answer the same set of questions. Do not look back on the answers you wrote before. Make sure that you would have learned something must change. And I want you to tell me at the end of 5 minutes.
Absolutely, Dr. Hendricks. And once they are completing the form, persons who, it's just wow. That's the only term I can say, wow, and then ditto that, wow, wow. I was running a self-audit as you went through, Dr. Hendricks, and so I'm going to invite persons to just place in the chat one thing that you learned from this webinar, or just one emotion that you're feeling, or just one sentiment. Just type it in the chat so we can all share the experience together. Dr. Hendricks, a few things jumped out. It is 15%, 450,000. And when you drop that 15% globally, it's 1.25 billion people.
Yeah.
That's a lot of people.
Oh,
That's a lot of us. You know, when you spoke about ramps versus slant, it got me thinking. So it is just, it's just wonderful. We have some messages. Andrew, you want to just read a few of the messages here as we move towards our, well, we move to the vote of thanks, but just in a short
I
time.
am hearing that the form is closed for the post-test.
Oh, yes, 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 Dr. Hendricks, I'm seeing that now. So whilst you work on that.
So my team will help me to ensure that we have a form that we can collect the information, because we wouldn't want you to leave and not be able to tell us what you would have learned.
And should in case it not pop up, don't worry, we can always share it for them to resubmit, for them to submit after, because we have the contact information. So we have the support in that regard as well. So Andrew, you want to just share some of the comments that you're seeing?
Okay, Prudence. I am seeing persons saying, just a minute. Right. Okay, I'm not seeing
So it is
any
very
comments.
very informative
yes.
presentation, eye-opening, shifting my point of view, considering legality from some persons are considering from the strategic level. Dr. Hendricks, persons are saying your presentation was very clear, concepts well placed, well put together, very informative. And this is the kind of conversation, this is the kind of sentiment we want. And that is why make sure we see you next week. And it's also my birthday, so it will be a great birthday present for us to share the first part of the morning together. That would be wonderful. So I will hand over to Rochelle now to do the official vote of thanks.
Good. Still 1 minute to 12. So good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As we bring this first session of our webinar series, Advancing Beyond Ramps and Special Parking, to a close, it is my distinct pleasure on behalf of the Management Institute for National Development to extend our sincere thanks to all those who made this session both insightful and impactful. We begin by expressing our sincere appreciation to the Honorable Pernell Charles Jr., Minister of Labor and Social Security, for delivering the greetings. We are truly grateful for your support and for underscoring the importance of advancing inclusive practices beyond traditional approaches to accessibility. You have charged us, sir, to move from obligation to ownership, from accessible to intentional design, and from passive awareness to active implementation. We express our deepest appreciation to our presenter, Dr. Christine Hendricks, Chief Executive Officer of the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities, for delivering such a thought-provoking and engaging discussion on moving beyond physical accessibility. Your expertise, practical insights, and clear commitment to advancing inclusion have challenged us to think beyond basic accessibility measures and to embrace more meaningful systemic approaches. You emphasize that persons living with disabilities cannot and should not be put in a box. There are no limitations. To our Chief Executive Officer of the Mind, Dr. Ruby Brown, we express appreciation for sharing the opening remarks. Thank you for setting the tone for this important discussion and for your continued leadership and commitment to advancing inclusive practices and stimulating public awareness on issues of national, regional, and global importance. We also extend our gratitude to our moderator, Mrs. Prudence James Townsend, the Director of Business Development and Communication, for officially commencing the proceedings and skillfully guiding the conversation and ensuring a dynamic and interactive session. Mrs. Andrea Toussaint, Manager Leadership Development, thank you for ably introducing our presenter for this morning's webinar session. To the organizers and the planning team, thank you for your vision and dedication in conceptualizing and executing this important webinar series. Your efforts behind the scenes have ensured a seamless and enriching experience for all participants. We also acknowledge our technical team for their efficient support in managing the virtual platform and ensuring that everything ran smoothly. Finally, to all our participants, thank you for joining us, for your engagement, and for your continued interest in advancing inclusive practices. Your presence and participation are what make these conversations meaningful and impactful. As we conclude this first session, we look forward to your continued participation in the upcoming session of this series, which will be held next week, Friday, on March 27, 2026, aka Prudence James Townsend's birthday, under the sub-theme, Practical Strategies for Accessible and Inclusive Customer Service. You do not want to miss this session next week. Thank you all, and do have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rochelle. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, have a good afternoon. We'll see you next week. God's blessings.
Goodbye, Mind team.
All right, Dr. Hendricks, excellent presentation.